Hey. Welcome everyone to the second webinar in the 2024-2025 webinar series hosted by the ARC of Greater Pittsburgh. I am Melissa Skiffin. I am a disability and family support advocate here with the ARC of Greater Pittsburgh. I have been with the ARC of Greater Pittsburgh for just over 6 years now. And I am also the parent of a 13-year-old seventh grader with an intellectual disability and autism. So a lot of this information is new to a lot of people. It's also pretty new to me too. So while I am hoping professionally, I am also going to be learning as a parent right along with all of you. Ever since Jennifer and I had this conversation about student-led IEP meetings, I don't know, I think it's been almost 2 months ago now, I've been absolutely over the moon excited for this evening. I just love learning about student empowerment and just letting students guide and learn leadership roles. So we are super excited you're all here. As I said, I am from the ARC of Greater Pittsburgh. We are an affiliate of Achieva. Advocacy and family supports. We support, and also now the ARC of Erie. We started affiliating with the ARC of Erie about 18 months ago. All fall under the Achieva family of organizations. The ARC of Greater Pittsburgh provides technical assistance and casework for individual advocacy, special education, transition to adulthood, government benefits, and then home and community-based services. We also engage in systemic advocacy in Harrisburg and also federally in Washington, D.C. And then we work to develop policies on disability and healthcare-related issues. This is the Achieva family tree. You can see underneath it is the ARC of Greater Pittsburgh, but also Achieva Support, Achieva Resource, the Achieva Family Trust. Also, we are affiliated with Autism Connection of Pennsylvania. That affiliation happened about 2.5 years ago. And then, as I mentioned, the ARC of Erie County. This is our geographic reach. The ARC of Greater Pittsburgh supports people in Beaver, Allegheny, and Westmoreland County, and then also up in Erie for the ARC of Erie. And our mission and vision here at Achieva is that we advocate with, empower, and support people with disabilities and their families throughout their lifespan. Achieva has been around for a little over 70 years now, and we truly do support people throughout the lifespan, starting with birth to 3 for early intervention, advocacy supports throughout school age, and then adults as well. And then our vision is that Achieva envisions a community where all people with disabilities lead lives of personal significance. Core values are respect, passion, ethics, change, and team. And here's our contact information. If you have any follow-up questions after tonight's webinar, or you think of something a week later and you want to get in contact with somebody, this is how you can get in contact with us. I want to make sure that not only are people getting information tonight and being a part of the conversation, but you have ways to stay connected after the webinar ends in case anything comes up in the future or there's more support needed. So that is just a quick introduction of ARC of Greater Pittsburgh, myself, Achieva as a whole, and what we do as an organization. But for the important part of this evening is to turn the floor over to Jennifer and David. I will let them introduce themselves, but Jennifer and David, we are so grateful that you're here for taking the time to spend the evening with us, and we are looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Thank you, Melissa, for that great introduction and for organizing this evening. I know if I had to identify my top 3 passion projects at work, they would be speech language training, family engagement, and student-led IEPs. Just love to talk about those topics. I'm really excited to be here today. Okay, well, welcome to our session tonight entitled Empowering Student Leadership. What is a student-led IEP? Now, we always like to start our presentations with the why. Why are we here? Why are we talking about this? And I would say we are here because the student-led IEP process benefits students, families, schools, and indeed the world. Because student-led IEPs are a way for individuals with disabilities to find their voice, to express themselves, and to advocate. And that's something that benefits all of us. So we have a few objectives here today. One, we're going to talk about the potential benefits of student-led IEPs. We'll also discuss aspects of how do you do this work? If I were getting started with it, what would I do? And then we also want to have you reflect yourselves upon what's one way that you, regardless of your role as a student, as a supporter of a student, as an educator, how could you get involved in student-led IEPs right now? What would be your first move? All right, so this is just a little idea of what the timing is going to look like. I'm sure it will ebb and flow. We're going to be very flexible, but it will be something like this. We'll do our introduction. We'll go over the why of student-led IEPs, then talk about what do they consist of, take a little break, do how to do student-led IEPs, and then finish up with any questions, survey responses, anything like that. So cool. So I'm going to start out with my introduction first before I turn it over to my partner, David. My name is Jennifer Geibel, and I'm an educational consultant at Patton West. So that's the Pittsburgh office. If you're aware of the Patton system, we have 3 offices across the state. I've had a long, meandering road through special education. I started out as a music therapist and then worked as a music therapist and music teacher for a long time while I became a speech language pathologist, and then received my supervisor of special education certification. And then I got my doctorate in special ed from the University of Pittsburgh. So I've been in various roles as a speech language pathologist. I still see students for speech, though it's more limited because I do have a day job as an educational consultant. But regardless of all the experiences that I've had, I always say that I never learned quite as much about education or about myself as an educator until I had my 3 kids. And just, a little bit about my kids, they are all teenagers. So they eat a lot. I buy a lot of food. I have a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, and 16-year-old, all boys. And all of them have IEPs. So I have 2 sons with IEPs or with GIEPs, and my youngest son is twice exceptional. So he keeps me on my toes all the time. So that is me.
Hi, my name is David. I'm 22 years old, and I graduated from Cyber Charter High School this summer. I have autism and an intellectual disability. I am in my freshman year of college. Graduate. No, I read my introduction a little bit wrong. I'm I'm a freshman. I'm in my second year as a college freshman in community college. That's where I meant to say. And that's about it.
Okay, and David didn't share this with you, but he is a man of many hobbies. So very into drawing and aspects of video game design, and he keeps busy. So definitely knows what he enjoys. Now we're going to start out just exploring the why. And for those of you who feel great about student-led IEPs, maybe this is preaching to the choir. You might already love student-led IEPs. You might already prioritize them. However, we always emphasize this topic because the fact is that sometimes we have to talk people into why we want to do student-led IEPs. To some of us, it might seem, it's a no-brainer, but to other people, they're really looking for, well, what are the benefits? So we want to make sure we hit that topic. Right, so I'd like to start out with a topic that we discuss sometimes in special education, which is the birthday party analogy. So I want you to think of throwing a birthday party for someone. Now, you've been planning this party for months. It's perfect. You have fantastic food. You have great music, an excellent venue. You've got those fun party games to play and a cool little swag bag that everybody gets when they leave. Awesome cake, lots of candles. And you get to this day of the party and everybody's there. And they're all, chatting, they're all involved. And then you realize you've never invited the birthday person. The whole reason you were having this party was for that individual and they're not there. And I would say that it would be equally as bad if you did invite that individual, but they're really sitting somewhere else not enjoying any of the festivities, kind of off on their own, not talking to anybody, not active. So that would be a pretty disappointing birthday party. Well, unfortunately, IEPs are like that a lot. They're about the person with the disability, but those individuals aren't always there. And when they are there, sometimes they don't feel they can speak up. So that's what we're going to hit upon today. How do we make individuals with disabilities, how do we make the environment more conducive to them expressing their ideas and really welcome their voice and their advocacy in their meetings? And there is an article about this. If you look up, why is this cake on fire? You can read a great article about this concept. All right. So I want to take a moment thinking of that birthday party analogy. I want you to take a moment in the chat and share one thing that would make your birthday perfect. So this is your birthday. Something you love to eat, something you love to do, or special people you'd want to have there. And go ahead and put those into the chat. Okay. So I'm seeing in the chat all sorts of different things. Family, friends, a trip. I love to travel too. I'm with you. That would be mine. Ice cream, delicious. Surrounded by family and friends. A snow day. Okay, Lori has a winter birthday. Hi, Lori. I know you. Chinese food, chocolate cake. All right, David. Not to put you on the spot, but what would be your perfect birthday food or activity?
Molly, plans, and pizza.
Okay, cool. That sounds awesome. I would love to go ballroom dancing. So all of us put different things. I mean, a lot of people put family and friends. I'd love to have my kids with me on my birthday. Absolutely true. But we had different desires and we had different things that were important to us. Somebody said chocolate cake. I'm not a cake person. Would rather have like pie for my birthday or a nice cocktail and just something like that. So we all like different things. And we have to remember that when we do an IEP meeting, that we have to keep the individual in that meeting and figure out what are their desires from life. Okay. So we ask ourselves, why is it important that individual student voice is heard? And I think one of the reasons that we can understand the most is this concept of what it's like to be an individual with a disability in the adult world, in the world beyond school. So we often say that schools shift from the world of entitlement to the adult world of eligibility. So we are eligible for services, eligible for accommodations, but we have to ask for them. In school, sometimes they come to us, sometimes we still have to advocate for ourselves, right? But there is some accountability there on behalf of the school that doesn't exist in the outside world. So if we're looking at something like post-secondary education, who's responsible for advocating for individuals with disabilities? What about within the community? What about within the workplace? And that answer is always going to be the individual with the disability. It is the expectation that those individuals speak up for themselves. So why wouldn't we start that process in school and develop that voice? However, even though we know this to be true, that it's so important that individuals with disabilities can speak up for themselves, who in reality talks during IEP meetings? Now, this is kind of an old graphic. It is my hope that this is a different number now. This was 2006, and yet I'm afraid. I'm afraid it isn't that different. So if we look at this chart, this is showing us at an IEP meeting, 51% of the conversation is directed by special education. Then we do have family members in there at 15%. We got some gen ed and administration. Actually, with that number was bigger as well, gen ed, some support staff. And then look at the student number, which is so small and is a 3. That's a disappointing number because that is showing us that students with disabilities have very little voice in their meeting. And it could be the fact that they are not there, but it could also be that when they are there, they really don't get to take the lead. So the answer to this problem, of course, is developing an IEP meeting that the student can really be an active participant in, and in fact, a leader. So what is a student-led IEP? A student-led IEP is when a student participates in the creation of any part of their own special education plan or takes a leadership role throughout the process. And I wrote a note here, and I'm going to say this 1,000 times, and I apologize for that already. But when we're thinking of student-led IEPs, it is not just the meeting itself, though that is important. However, this is throughout the process. So this also applies to things like progress monitoring, setting goals in your personal life, asking for accommodations and modifications, meeting with the Office of Disabilities Resources to get what you need. This goes beyond that idea of just one meeting. Now, there are a lot of benefits of student-led IEPs. For students, we see that when they participate in their meetings, they have an increased knowledge of their strengths and their needs. They definitely have more awareness of accommodations and modifications. So what is set in place to help them? Students have more self-confidence. They have increased engagement and accountability. Smoother transitions, not just between high school and the outside world, but between grades, between teachers. And overall, higher levels of gainful employment and post-secondary education. So we have more kids moving on to training or college, and then also obtaining gainful employment. Now, families too benefit from this. I know I have some family engagement gurus out there in the crowd, which I appreciate. Up high to you all out there. Families also benefit. So first of all, they get this experience of observing their children in a leadership role. And that makes it really motivating to actively engage in IEP meetings. I mean, I always think of this like families will go to a school concert if their kid plays in the orchestra, right? You never miss it. But you probably don't go hear the orchestra if you don't have a child playing in the orchestra. But when student-led IEP meetings happen, we know that the child is the active agent in that meeting. So we feel even better about going to them. When we're at these meetings where students are leading, we also feel more welcome. We feel there's more of a partnership there. And overall, families themselves get greater knowledge of their children, their youth skills, preferences, visions for the future. And what about for schools? Well, for schools, we see this increased positivity during meetings where the meeting becomes more of a celebration and less of a standoff between multiple parties. We see greater cultural responsivity, reduction of tension, increased indicator 13 outcomes. So that has to do with secondary transition for all those of you out there who maybe are unfamiliar with that. And then also increased compliance with the law. And we all benefit from teamwork, from collaboration, from that reminder that the student is the center of the IEP process, that it's all about the individual. And then as a counterpart to that, we see there's a reduced stigma associated with disabilities, which hopefully goes into society. And we also see, in general, enhanced IEP teams conversations. Now, if you want to learn more about benefits of student-led IEPs, there are several documents available on the Patent SLIEP Hub, and I'm going to give you a link to that later. But if you have people in your life that are hesitant about this, they're just not sure, they don't know if it's worth it, please refer them to these documents. There's one for students, one for schools and educators, and one for families. And I will take you there later, but feel free to check that out. All right, so I've talked a lot, and it's time for me to be quiet and let our student, our graduated student, have his turn here. So, David, you're up. Take a minute and just kind of tell us, what were IEPs like before you started leading your own IEP?
Well, If you want the short conclusion, it's worth long, boring, and confusing.
Long, boring, and confusing. I could see that because those meetings do last a long time. And how about your own tendency to speak up?
Well, when I really want to speak up a lot, I didn't get to until I had help from you.
Okay. So yeah, so eventually, we started working on this, and you started leading your own IEP, so then you could speak up. So what did you like about leading your IEP?
I felt more empowered, and I felt like I also had more control.
Mm-hmm. And how about the understanding of the other people on the IEP team?
They were a little baffled, and also surprised there's a lot of stuff I said.
Yeah, and I do remember that day. So yes, they were baffled and surprised, which was unfortunate because some of them had worked with you for a long time, but this was the first time they seemed to really get you.
Yeah,
So that was a great advantage. And then how about your family? What was that experience like for them?
they were proud of me.
Yeah. And I've talked to David's parents pretty extensively about this, and um, it was really an aha moment to see you out there taking the lead on your IEP meeting. And yeah, they were definitely proud of you. All right. Thank you, David, for sharing out. So I want the rest of you to share out what's something that you or your child or one of your students has achieved through self-advocacy. So something that they made happen. And what aha moments happened because the student had a voice in an IEP team meeting. You can either share this in the chat or you can also unmute. I'm cool with that. I think you have that ability. So let's take a moment in the chat. So something that you achieved or your student or your child through self-advocacy. Doesn't have to be in the IEP, but it can be. And as you guys populate the chat, I'll share a moment from one of my students. And David's going to share his moments later, so I won't use him as my example right now. But I had another student that I was doing student-led IEPs with. And this particular student was nonverbal. But when I started working with him, it was clear he had a lot to say. And he felt limited by his augmentative communication device because it didn't have the words he wanted. Because he had a fantastic vocabulary and he was looking for pictures of words, but he wanted to say other words that weren't there. So he started using a typing app that was able to recreate his voice, and we'll actually see some of his work later when I show you some examples. But I remembered his first student-led IEP. He had created an IEP presentation, and he was using his AAC device to speak for him. And he said at one point, I'm interested in going to college. And he was about 12 years old at this time. I'm interested in going to college, and I want to major in math because I find it deeply calming. His word, not my word. And you could have heard a pin drop at that meeting whenever he said that. Because not only had no one ever asked him about his feelings for the future, no one had thought that he had a future that included college until he said so. And it was definitely an aha moment because in that moment, I think it was the administrator of that meeting said, he's in life skills. What is the road from life skills to college? And it wasn't that that road was impossible. It was just that we had to think about it really carefully, right? How we would get from here to there. And so that was one of the biggest moments that I ever had as far as watching student advocacy at work. Does anybody else have something they want to share out? You don't have to do it in the chat. You can tell a story. But Susan. Okay, Susan.
Hi, Jennifer. This is Susan. I'm an advocate. I work in the ARC for Lehigh, Northampton County. But I have a student who, since the age change to stay in school to 22, she was at Project Search, was going to end her school year. And then I talked to her and I said, you have another whole year. What would you like to do? So she had never thought about taking a class. And I said, you have a whole year. You have such opportunity. So she, spoke to her IEP team and said, I want to take a class. We had to work through OBR. We had to challenge the school, but she got what just to take an art class. So she's taking an art class. Then she has another whole year. So I was really proud of her.
Well, that was wonderful because she really went after something that she wanted and needed and was able to make that happen. So I'm proud of her too, and I don't even know her. That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that, Susan.
You're welcome.
All right. So we've had some conversations about the why. Why is this important for all of our students? But let's take a moment and talk about the what. What are student-led IEPs? What do they look like? What do they sound like? And I want to start by talking not only about what they are, but what they aren't. And some of these statements I will make probably numerous times just to get the point across, but just something to think about. So what are the big ideas of student-led IEPs? Well, one thing they aren't is only for older students. Now, we do talk about student-led IEPs a great deal when it comes to high schoolers and secondary transition. But that does not have to be when student-led IEPs start. In fact, it's great if they start earlier than that. And I'm a big proponent of having my kids at their IEP meetings even when they're very young. And that's something that I have asked for from the time my kids were probably 10 or even younger, because I learned from them while they're there. My one son at one time had a goal to work on writing as part of his IEP, and I thought, that's great. He's a beautiful writer, and writing's a wonderful skill. And he said, I hate writing. I don't want to do it. I'd like to do more math. And so math became the focus of what he wanted to do. My other son, we had an IEP meeting last year, was sort of a reactionary IEP. There was a problem happening. We all came together. But he was able to sit at the table because originally he wasn't there. I kind of insisted that he brought in. And he was able to sit at the table and say, I don't know how to access these things online. I don't know how to submit my assignment. And so we were actually able to walk through on the computer how those things happen and go through the protocols for each class. If he hadn't been there to say that, I wouldn't have known, and his teachers didn't know. So these are for every student, whether they are high schoolers or younger. You can start these as soon as a student begins in special education. Either way, it will increase awareness for that student and increase student voice. Another question we get is, well, some students, it would be impossible for them to lead their own IEP. And my answer to that question would be, it's never impossible. Any individual, any student who participates in special education can lead their IEP, but we're going to individualize it based on student strengths, student needs, and student preferences. So what they want to do, what they how they express themselves. If they express themselves, in alternative communication or through pictures, we're going to make that happen for them. Not impossible for any student. Student-led IEPs also aren't the student just doing whatever they want. Now, there's definitely a motivation and preference element here. Like, if a student prefers to present a certain way, I'm going to roll with that, sure. But we still have to go through the elements of the IEP, right? There's stuff we still have to get done, so we can't say whatever. We can't spend the whole time just talking about rollerblading, but we could talk about rollerblading for a little bit and think about what connections are there to my educational life. Another thing we have to think of is student-led IEPs also aren't over when the IEP meeting is over. So students should be included throughout the IEP process, not just the meeting day. Sometimes it's easy to confuse the IEP, which is compliance, with actual engagement. And the way we present IEPs sometimes makes it seem like, oh, when we sign this off, we're done. That's not really true, is it? That IEP governs what happens during the school year. So the students should be involved all throughout the process, whether that's by requesting accommodation or doing their own progress monitoring. There could be lots of ways the student can participate. Another idea about what they aren't is they aren't the responsibility of the family or student. Really, schools to be taking the lead on that. That does not mean that as family members, because I know several of you are on the call, that doesn't mean you can't advocate for your kids. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't draw awareness to the school, like, hey, student-led IEPs are a good idea. Certainly you can do that, and we welcome that. But ultimately, it should be the school's responsibility to facilitate these for students. And then also, student-led IEPs are not the same for every student every year. They change. We change based on the student. The student goes through transitions. Sometimes, maybe we do something more simple the next year because it's been a rough year, and that's okay. Whatever works for the student, meet them where they're at, and build upon that belief that meaningful student participation is going to make a better IEP. So whatever we need to do to facilitate that, that's what we're going to do. So again, being repetitious, which students can engage in student-led IEPs? All of them. All of them. Any student who receives special education services can engage, regardless of age, regardless of challenges, because we're going to make that happen for them. So there is a continuum that we could think of for student-led IEP meetings. Maybe our first step is just getting the student in the room. Like, I'm going to attend. Maybe I'm only going to attend for a short period of time because that's where I'm at right now, but I'll be there. Then we might go to leading a small part in the meeting. I know that a lot of my students start out leading present levels. I've also had students start out by introducing members of the team. Like, that's what they do. That's their part. And whatever works for the student is fine. Then as we move up the continuum, maybe the student is engaging most of the time. Maybe instead of talking 3% of the time, like on that graph, they're the ones talking 97% of the time. Or maybe they're conducting the entire meeting. Thinking about that idea that the meeting is not just, or that the IEP is not just that one meeting date, we have to continue the student-led IEP process outside of the meeting. So part of this is learning about the special education process, just how it works, why we do it, what does an IEP mean in my life. That's important. Students can also perform tasks like sending out the invitations for the meeting. I've mentioned this one a lot because I think it's really important. They can know about and request accommodations and modifications. And one thing we see with students is they'll ask for these with some teachers, but not others. So kind of working on advocating for yourself in a lot of different environments, that's important. They can do things like identify and research careers that they're interested in, learn more about jobs they might possibly want to do. They can work on skills that are necessary for IEP leadership, skills like organization and communication. They can express their strengths, their needs, their hopes, their aspirations, set personal goals. I always say that goal setting in itself is a life skill. That ability to set a goal and to see when you've made progress. I do it in my life, probably a lot of you, all of you perhaps do it in your life, whether it's a financial goal, a goal for your health, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's even, reading the 100 best books of all time, whatever is your personal goal. But that's a life skill. It's something we all need to do in order to create accountability for ourselves. So that's something that students can work on. We also see them perhaps monitoring progress towards goals, identifying tools that will help themselves, an app that does something great for them, for example, and much more. So there's lots of ways we can continue this process outside of the student-led IEP meeting. But then we always get that age-old question of what about students with complex needs? And I would, once again, challenge everyone and say students with complex needs and unique challenges can engage in student-led IEPs. That Haddon SL IEP Hub I mentioned, which I'll share the link with you, we have a whole video on this particular topic, because this is a question we get a lot. How do we do it? Well, basically, we do it like we do anything else in special education, and we individualize. Students can engage in a lot of different ways. We just have to find their way, find the way that works for them. So sometimes, yes, facilitating that process, it requires a lot of creativity and a lot of out-the-box thinking, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done. So here are just some ways that students with complex needs can engage in student-led IEPs. So they could lead the entire IEP meeting. Maybe they use an AAC device to do that. They might introduce IEP team members by selecting photos from an array. Maybe they send out IEP meeting invitations by hand delivering them to team members around the school. They might present information about themselves using whatever their preferred form of communication is. If they like to make art, maybe they make something artistic to represent their strengths or their aspirations. They might keep track of progress towards their goals in whatever a preferred format for that might be. I had a student once who loved to build things out of clay. So as she, achieved higher percentages, she got more clay. And then the end, she got to destroy whatever she had just built, which was also great fun. I've definitely made her eager to work on her goals. And then we have, also advocate for use of SDIs. Maybe we do that by eye gaze. Maybe we do that by pointing or selecting a picture. But either way, any student can engage in that activity. And there would be lots of other ways we could engage students with complex needs in IEPs. It just requires us to be very creative with our thinking. Super, David. And okay, so this is your turn to give us some information here. Tell us about your participation in your IEP team meeting. What did you do at the meeting? And what did you do to prepare for the meeting?
Well, and a lot of your help and to get prepared. So that was very useful. Now, waited for the meetings. I talked a lot, and so like a lot of the slides in my slides.
I didn't
Yeah,
quite hear all of that, but so you were talking about how you thought about all the information you put on your
yeah.
slides? Yeah. And what were some topics that you talked about on the slides?
Oh, what 2 years I wanted the first two. That's one of
Yeah,
them.
absolutely.
I also talk about my hobbies as well a little bit on there.
Yeah. What else? The day of the meeting itself, what did you do?
I messaged. I first the later the day of the meeting, and it went pretty well. I like said in like the slides like what jobs I did not want to like take part in. Yeah,
Yeah, and that was a really good slide. And in fact, David, would you mind terribly if I share your IEP from that meeting? Because I think people would like to see that.
I would not mind.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. And in fact, I had a couple examples, but I want to start with what David was just talking about because um, he was so right on with what he was saying. So I have actually a couple examples of student IEPs. I will share David's first. All right.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Honestly, I have pretty complex needs too. For instance, from a student was help me. I was motivated to lead my IEP. I wasn't even motivated to be there because I didn't see a connection between my IEP meeting and my school curriculum. I have pretty complex. Wait, never mind. I'm just my brain is a bit mellow today. It's like, yeah, I've been busy with solids.
No, you're fine. And I appreciated that. So you had participated in your meeting before you started doing the student-led IEPs, but you weren't really motivated because you couldn't see what that reflected about your actual life. And I think that's something that's important to share. Okay. So this in front of us is David's IEP PowerPoint. And so David mentioned that he thought about a lot of things before his presentation. He wanted to do an introduction. Now, this is from a couple years ago. David is older than this now, but he wanted to talk about who he was. Not only his disability, but also what he liked to do, who his family was. So he shared out a paragraph on that. Then, as David was saying, he had some pretty complex challenges. And so he wanted everybody to know what were these challenges. And it turned out that really not everybody on the team was aware of everything that David had going on. And this really helped them understand it a lot better. And then he wrote about things that made the day really difficult for him, but also his strengths. So things he feels good about, And I totally agree with this, David. And I've known each other many years. And David, I just love your sense of humor and your creativity. And those were two of the things that you came up with for that meeting. And there are really impressive things that you do, David. Like you have friends from all over the world that you meet with online. And you just deal with a lot of challenges, which is all really impressive stuff. So all of these were things that he worked on. One thing that he did point out, and I thought this was really useful. So sorry about switching the slide so quickly, but this was an important slide for David. He really wanted to share this because he wanted to think not only what are his plans for the future, and his big plan was to go into video game design. That was something that came up as a real area of interest. But there were also things that he absolutely did not want to be involved in. And do you want to share a couple of those things, David?
Yeah, so one job I definitely would not want to be involved is fast food
Yeah,
because I have postural that tachycardia syndrome, and like I can't stand in one place for a long time.
right.
Or something like influences.
Yeah. So that idea of standing for a long time in a fast food place, that's not going to work for you. And then fast food had other disadvantages too, right? Yeah. Like
It's also very hot areas like
yeah, it's very hot there.
states.
Hmm. Right. So all of these were things that you, David, became very self-aware of and wanted to share out with people, which was important because at this time you were really starting to think about what did I want from a job. Um, so this was really helpful to the team to do that. So I have a couple other examples. So that was David's example. And thank you so much for letting us see that. I have a couple other students who've given me permission to share their examples of IEP, student-led IEP meetings as well. So this particular student was very similar to what David did. He kind of wrote about himself. As you see, it's different. He picked his own colors. He picked his own designs for the PowerPoint. But he shared his challenges. He shared what he wanted to do in the future. And he too really impressed his team, who had never really seen him in that light. I have another student that I'll share out, and these students have given me permission to share their information with you. So this particular student created a book. I think I have to go to my library for this. Right? He created a book for his IEP meeting this year. And partly why he did this is because he is nonverbal. And so rather than using his AAC device to speak everything for him, what he wanted was to be able to have the book be read aloud to him. So if I hit the play button, it will actually read it aloud. The advantage of this presentation was that this book read to us, to all of us on the IEP team. So he didn't have to click a new page every time he was trying to express himself, by using his IEP device or his AAC device, because this just read straight through. And he was able to really personalize it. As you see, he has a lot of pictures in here. He's really active. He does a lot of stuff. So he wanted to showcase that. And I love his one sentence in here. And he always says this. He says, "I am autistic and terrific." And that's true. He's just like a warm and wonderful human being. And I'm so glad that he takes pride in who he is. But again, he presented his interests, his needs. The needs section is really important because he's able to say things like, "I need a lot of breaks. I need sensory breaks because my body is really hard to control. I have to work so hard. I have to practice so much." So this was his book. And he too was thinking about the future and what he wanted to do. Some other examples that I have is I mentioned that this does not have to be just something that happens and shouldn't just be something that happens at the IEP meeting. What we want to make sure we're doing is involving students all the time. So I have a couple other examples. So this is actually a rubric that one of my students created. And so this particular student was dealing with just some residual unintelligibility. He wasn't totally being understood by everyone, which was impacting his education, even though he'd really worked on speech bounds and he had them down in an organized environment. But he had something that motivated him. He was the defensive captain of his football team. And he wanted all those people he was yelling at practice to understood everything he said. So that was his connection here. That was his motivation. And he created this intelligibility rubric. And his goal, what he wanted to see, was him getting an 11 or 12 on this rubric, that his speech was almost always understandable to everyone. Another example that I have is kind of a personal one. So, anybody remember the pandemic, right? The pandemic. Yeah. So when the pandemic happened, all of a sudden we're all working from home, right? And working, doing school from home. And for some of us, this was not common. My kids didn't go to cyber school. So when we were working from home, this was something they had to get used to. And my youngest son really had a hard time organizing his materials for cyber school. So we worked together as a team and created his morning checklist, things that he needed to have. So this was for when he was at home. He needed to have a Chromebook, he needed a charger, he needed a pencil, all important things, right? Also things he needed to do. He needed to log into different places. He needed to visit all these people's different clever pages, not the clever, and check his email. That was important. So that was something that he did, or he created with the help of his team in order to allow him to be really accountable for what he needed to get done. And then just one more thing I will share with you. As I said, you can really do anything with progress monitoring as well. That's a great way to engage students in their IEP. So this would just be like one example of this. And students in the class might do this anyway, but something like this that involves coloring, you could have paint, you could build with blocks, whatever, to keep track of progress. This is a great way to get a student involved with seeing, oh yeah, I am making great progress with this, or I need to work a little more on this. All right, I want to take a moment before I go ahead and share the presentation again. I would like to just take a moment to allow people to add into the chat. You heard some of the ways which students could lead IEP meeting. What do you see some of your students or the child in your life, or if you were an individual with disability, what can you really see yourself doing within an IEP meeting that you're like, yeah, I'd feel really confident about doing that if somebody would just kind of get me started. So would you want to create a PowerPoint? Would you want to monitor your progress towards a goal? Go ahead and throw your idea into the chat. Create an invite list. Yeah, that's a good one. Even if it's just to learn, like, these are the people on my team and here are their roles that they play. What else? What's something else somebody can think of? Have young, oh, I love it. Some things are coming in. Okay, so have young students share a goal they are working on. Have older students explain why not certain accommodations are needed. That's a great one because actually you learn a lot from that. Because sometimes we go into these meetings, we're like, these accommodations are fabulous and they're going to be great. And then the student's like, I will never ask for those. I never want them. Don't even put them on the, the list of SEIs because I don't want to be involved in that. And that's fair, because this is their life. So we had to find out another way. And then we also had monitoring goals would be a great start for my students. And I do like monitoring goals. That is one of my favorite ways to start because it increases that awareness of like, hey, this is what I'm working on and this is what I need to do better on that. I did also have a contribution. This is in my chat on my phone, so I'm just going to read it to you. So David's mom, who is also in the background there, she's fantastic mom. Hello. She was listening in, and she just wanted everybody to know, especially if you're a parent out there who is thinking to yourself, I'm not sure my kids can contribute. She wants you to know that because David has autism and he has some communication speech issues, it's hard for him to talk to anyone, especially strangers. He has other challenges as well, an intellectual disability, hard time paying attention, hard time processing, and difficulty sitting still. He needs breaks and he needs fidgets. So nonetheless, he did a fantastic job at his IEP meeting. But what really helped was that somebody else who wasn't a family member but willing to work together with the family helped create that PowerPoint. And so that was just something that David and his mom wanted to share out. So having somebody from more educational role was really helpful. And David wanted to add that she helped me for a long time, so he got lots of practice to present it. Wasn't a family member, so didn't take it personally if, he said something. And oh, thank you, David. This is very sweet because I was the person that helped David. So he said, even though there were strangers at my IEP, Jen's support helped make it possible. So I appreciate that, David. I so enjoyed seeing you present at your IEP meeting. Didn't worry as much about the speech because he had the PowerPoint there as a support. So having a support is really good. And he was able to talk about things that people didn't understand before. So he talked about reading comprehension. And so the team then knew they needed to use more plain language, explain things better. And he started working on being able to say, I didn't understand that, or please slow down and tell me again, whatever was needed. Oh, and Zoom was a good thing to do instead of in person. So, David, you could get up and walk around the room. You could take breaks. Had people there to remind the team that he needed a break. And also to use fidget toys, things like that. Not really fidget toys, fidget. I always have something in my hands too, and David will tell you this. I'm constantly playing with the rubber bands, or I have this pen right now. We all have our things we need to stay focused. So thank you, David, for sharing that out. Yes. Okay, cool. So looking at the chat, person-centered plans. That's really, really great. Student interviews. I love that. Student gives their own list of strengths and needs. That's a great place to start. I love this. The student could draw or write a vision statement of what they would like to do. So that drawing is great. I've also seen it kind of, David, like what you did, where you wrote what you didn't want to do with a career. Sometimes people are able to better express things they don't want. Whether it's like, I don't want this career or I don't want this strategy in school. So that's another thing that people can share. And then show abilities outside of school, especially for transition. So what chores you do, what community activities, so the team can really see potential for employment. These are all great ideas. Thanks, everybody. The next thing you want to think about is how are we going to introduce what is an IEP? What does it mean? What are the parts of it? What do they mean to me? And then give your students a key role in meeting planning. What do they want to do as part of the meeting? What will be comfortable for them, but also kind of push them to the next level? And then you want to set students up for success. So David, how many times did I have you practice your IEP before you presented it?
A lot.
A lot, yes. 1,000 times it felt like, I'm sure. So it's important to have that practice time. And not only did you practice it, you used the PowerPoint you were going to use for the presentation. We did it in a Zoom platform, so you would kind of see how it will work. So not only practicing, but using the elements that you're going to use anyway in the meeting. Because just like us, like me, I would have to practice learning how to use Google Meets more. But we all go through things that, to use them in a meeting, we want to spend some time on them. And then we really need to get the family involved as well. So beyond inviting family to meetings, right? Talking to families more about what are the resources you have? All right. Okay. What have you been able to secure for your child in the home? What do you want to see their lives be like when they get to the next step? So those are all important things to talk about. All right, I'm hoping to move to the next slide. If you are not sure how to start, we literally have this resource, which is for youth that are on their own, that are just hearing about student-led IEPs for the first time and need ideas on how to begin. We have a resource for that, and I'm going to share that out with you. If I open the link, I might have to share a different tab. That's okay. I will do that. So let me just bounce on over to there. Stop that share, move over. So this is part of the Student-Led IEP Resource Hub. Okay. I like this resource because this is the one that it just gives you ideas as to what could work for you, whether we're starting out by knowing yourself and what you want to do, creating a plan, creating a goal, keeping track of how you're doing in IEP goals. So these are just ways to begin this process. And then we have these not only for youth, but also if you're an educator out there and your school hasn't really taken to this idea of student-led IEPs, you're looking for ways to get started on your own. We have some ideas here as well. So not only talking about student-led IEP processes, but what resources do we have in inclusive practices, for example? What could I learn about universal design for learning that might help my child's advocacy, my students' advocacy? And then one for families as well, if you're beginning on your own. Some contact. I don't know if you guys are on here at Achieva. You will be on here after this meeting. I just thought of this right now. And then these are some resources from across the state that you could use. Right? Okay. And we're going to share some other resources with you later. All right. So let's go back here. Okay. So that's a resource that if you're really not sure how to get started, we can give you some advice. And then once you do get started, we have to be aware of the IEP team. So we know that an IEP team can be pretty big. Can have lots of members, not only people from the school, but people from outside agencies, from transition services. And we want to make sure we assemble the team, make sure the team knows that the student is the center of the IEP experience. And Then also make sure the team knows that we value their contribution. Right? So everybody has something different to communicate to the team. Special educators are able to teach students about their IEPs, make sure they know about their accommodations. Gen Ed, they know the curriculum. They're able to tell us about the standards. Administration, you guys, I know there's some administrators out there, really, you serve to create a culture of collaboration. You set expectations. You make this happen. Families, we can't ever underestimate the power of families in IEP meetings and in education in general. So understanding the roles of everyone and that we all have something to contribute. And then another thing to think about is to think about the connections between student-led IEP skills and what the team is already doing. So how does work for student-led IEPs relate to things like transition goals, self-advocacy skills, communication development, literacy, goal setting, life skills? So I'm very lucky being a speech language pathologist that I am always looking at communication. So when I involve students in their IEP process, I use those communication goals and I address them as we prepare. So I'm not throwing my special education programming out the window. I'm still working on my goals, but I'm doing it in such a way that we can also get the work done that we need to do for student-led IEPs. So really quickly in the chat, if you could share out some skills that you'd love to see your students improve, that you think would really be improved by working on their student-led IEP. Right. We'll wait for somebody to share it. There we go. Self-confidence. Yeah. Planning. Planning is really important. Self-advocacy. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. So that communication component, working on requesting accommodations for a lot of different environments, self-advocacy, self-awareness. I've even seen people able to work on things like math in preparation for a student-led IEP, do percentages, do counting, and, numeracy. Work on those skills while you build a student-led IEP. Right. Anybody else? Yeah, definitely helps with self-advocacy and confidence. Thanks for contributing that, David. Absolutely. Leadership. Yes, thank you. All right. I feel like it's stuck on my window. It's where it says assembling the team. Is that true?
That is true.
Why?
Who knows why Google Meets does what Google
We just don't know why they do what they do. Okay, let's do. All right. Yeah, it's just freezing for some reason. I am switching the slides, but it doesn't like it. Okay. There. Yeah, I would almost say it's my internet, but I paid for the really expensive internet that usually works really well. Yeah, it's a little bit frozen. Try it again. Yeah, I have like a gig of connectivity. There we go.
I think
Okay,
it was just a glitch. Temporary
maybe.
glitch.
All right. So making connections.
Good.
Next thing we're going to look at is ensuring success. We talked about this a little bit. First step to ensuring success, get the student involved in the preparation, right? Meet them where they're at. Make sure that they are kind of the one in charge of how they will participate. Teach any necessary skills. So if there's things that we need to work on or content knowledge that we need to know, we're going to teach that. You're going to practice using the equipment, whatever that's going to be. And we'll talk about what the students will say. So that doesn't mean that we write a script necessarily, though for some students, perhaps, sure. Some students will type something up that they'll just follow, but we'll kind of make it work for the student. We want to include supportive documents and artifacts. So if there's something the student drew or created that would help tell the story, do that. David, do you remember some of the things you included in your IEP meeting as artifacts?
Drawings of my pixel art.
Yeah, drawings of your pixel art. And I think you shared videos as well that we linked to. And these were important because David knew he wanted to do video game design. So including things that he created was really valuable for the team. And then allow the student to practice in the IEP environment. So if you're doing the IEP online, that's where we're going to practice. If you're doing it in a specific room, that's where we're going to practice, right? We're going to go to the environment that we'll be presenting it. All right, David. So we kind of talked about that you practice for your student-led IEP a lot, did it many times. Tell us a little bit about how that practice works.
Well, I had a lot of time resources what I wanted to say. Well, I also had be careful with my words in some words.
Yeah, and I think you very thoughtfully began to consider your words and what you'd be expressing with them. So you thought a lot about what you wanted to say.
Yeah.
And then how about the PowerPoint? Do you remember building the PowerPoint? What were some of the things you did when you built the PowerPoint?
Add in all the text and after the pictures.
Yeah, so you took pictures, you put in text, you even picked the color scheme, like whatever you thought expressed what you wanted to express. It was sort of a techie sort of background, which went with your video game design. Yeah, a lot of work went into it. And then tell us some of the successes that resulted from your student-led IEP.
Well, it helped me build up more confidence and more and empowered me more.
Hello?
I also got to go to tech school because of it.
Yeah. So you went to a tech school last year and you worked on a lot of different things there. You want to share out some of the things you did?
Yeah, I I worked on a bunch of videos and also some other stuff and some music.
Yeah, GarageBand, yeah, video editing. Is there anything else in there? I feel like I'm missing something. That's probably it. Yeah, so
Also practice story writing.
oh, that's right. Yeah, right. And yes, and David was able to enroll in that tech program because of his student-led IEP. Like I would say that was probably your big aha moment, David, that you were able to make that happen. And that was important because it gave you a lot of good skills for your video game design career. Anything else? Any other feelings that resulted from your student-led IEP?
Confidence.
Awesome. All right. So we have several resources here. If you've downloaded the PowerPoint, you'll be able to hyperlink to these. But there are a couple of resources that we wanted to share with you. We've already shared the Haddon Student-Led IEP Hub. So I would definitely favor that. I'm actually going to grab that and just throw that link directly in the chat, just in case you didn't download, because I want you to have that one at the very least.
And Jen, if it's okay with you, when I send out a follow-up email to all of the people who registered, I can share your slides and then they'll have all of the links and all of the content too.
That's great. All right, so there's the student-led IEP link. We're also going to go, let's go ahead and visit some of these other links as well. Sure is a good one, but I'm going to pull up I'm Determined. So I don't know whether anybody has experience with I'm Determined.org. Stop that there for the moment. But I'm Determined is a great site with a lot of great resources in it. I'm just going to pull it up and show it to you. And the address is literally imdetermined.org. Let me share this tab. I've used this a lot. So I'm Determined has resources, again, for youth educators and families. It also has a number of tools. One tool that I would really, encourage you to look at, let's see if I can find it easily, is the one-pager. All right, so when I go to the one-pager, this is a great way to start working on these ideas that you'll need to express in student-led IEP. We have a couple of different ones, but this is basically how it looks. It's just a one-pager where students can list their strengths, their interests, their preferences, their needs. It's something you can blow up to poster size if you want a student to put pictures in there. That's a good way to do that. We could do this through students kind of talking to each other and we're being their scribe, or they can write them themselves. Just a great way to begin the process. And the point of it is, say you really want someone to get you, like you want them to know it. Well, you do this, and this way we don't have to explain who we are to every single person. We can take our one pager and we can show it to them. So this is something that all of your students can make on hand for when they get a new teacher, for when they go to a new grade, or for when you want to prepare for your student-led IEP meeting. That's just one of many great resources that are on the site. I also like this other one, which is a bit newer, but it is the rubric, the student rubric for IEP participation. So again, this one's for students. So this is really a student thinking about, say, this element, IEP awareness. Level 1, I don't know what IEP stands for. I really don't know. I'm starting from the ground up. Level 2, I know what IEP stands for. Level 3, I know what it stands for and the purpose of the meeting. And level 4, I know what IEP stands for, the purpose, and I can tell others about these meetings. So this would be a good place if you wanted to do an informal assessment. You can apply something like this and kind of figure out where are your students at. So that is another great resource. Another link that I have in the PowerPoint is a guide for student involvement. I'm just going to open this link, then I'll share it out to you. If you need something that is more, I'm trying to think of a good word, that is more research-based, that you want to share out to, say, administration or something like that, I have a couple items in here that are more research-based. I'm going to show this one, article-based. So this is an Eric article. So just a guide to help teachers as they plan and implement student-led IEPs. Another one that I like is literally called Student-Led IEPs. And I'll share that tab with you. This is a pretty instrumental article, came out many years ago now, but it is really sort of the guide book for getting started on student-led IEPs. And there's lots of different resources in there that you can also refer to regarding self-advocacy and self-determination. It's a good article to have on hand. And then, of course, we already shared the student-led IEP resource from Patton, but that has a lot of great information on it as well. So I want to take a moment, and at this point in time, I want you to kind of think about, we've looked at several different resources. What is one resource that you think could help you plan and participate in student-led IEPs? So go ahead and fill in the chat. I would say if I had to identify one for getting started, the one pager from I'm Determined is something that I do with all of my students. That's really important to have on hand so students can explain who they are without having to like come up new with it every time they meet a new person. I think it's especially good in high school where all of a sudden we go from like one teacher to, I don't know, David, how many teachers did you have in high school?
A lot.
Yeah, 6 or something like that. I mean, you go from having one person that maybe two that kind of uh, tell you, are in charge of your education, and then you go to this whole crowd. So, all right, Melissa's agreeing with the one pager. Yeah, that is a favorite. Oh, and Leah likes the idea of using pictures for this. You absolutely can use pictures for this. And always love when people blow it up like real big. Now, obviously, it's not as portable that way if it's a big poster. Um, but if it works and if we can put that up in the classroom, that's fine. And sometimes people take pictures of like the students themselves doing activities, like showing their strength that way. Sometimes they put in pictures from magazines, whatever. Like the choice is yours here, but whatever speaks to the student is going to be really important. Okay, cool. Keep thinking out if you have something else you want to share, but we are at this time going to leave the floor open to questions. So questions for me or for David?
I
She doesn't look back to our site. Oh, sorry, David, go ahead.
like Western.
Oh, what's that?
I like Western.
Uh-huh. Oh, sorry, David. I'm like just trying to figure out my screen. Yes, question. So David will accept your question. As will I.
I have a question for you, David, if you have time to answer.
Go ahead.
For students who are considering this, what what are your recommendations? What are your top thing to start with or best ideas? So what would you share with another student who is considering doing this?
An objective
An objective advocate. That is excellent, David. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anybody else question in the chat or out loud? Kind of really going to the chat because I think every time I do it, it creates an infinity error.
Nothing in the chat right now, Jen. I can monitor that for you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, as someone who has done this with a lot of students, and I know we mentioned this during the presentation, but please don't forget, talk to the families about this process. Because first of all, families have a ton of valuable information that you can use all the time. Of course, they're the experts on their students. But also, I think it's very emotive for families to see their student going through this process and to see them using their voice and advocating for themselves. It's a really beautiful experience. So you want to make sure that they're aware that this is going on. I had a student just last year who, older student, 16, but it was his first student-led IEP, and his family was just so thrilled to see him take that leadership role, and they reached out to me and said, "Can we have a copy of his presentation? We want to give it to his grandparents, and we want to give it to, his aunts and uncles because we're so impressed with what he did." So just keep the lines of communication open. And it is probably something that you want to talk to families first before you start the process and just explain it and say why we're doing it, what are the benefits, and just talk it out. But that's something I would recommend. Anybody else have any good ideas of first steps? I know we had some student-led IEP experience here.
I was just going to say that some students, slow transition to be a student-led IEP because some kids really don't. They're intimidated by the large crowds, and sometimes when I'm in in the meeting with a student, I can feel that, when there's a lot of people staring at them, asking a lot of questions, I'll stop and say, all right, let's take a break. And even if it's just having them come to a meeting for 10, 15 minutes, because I think the other issue is when they hear so negativity. Like I remember for my oldest daughter, who's now 35, I used to go to her IEPs and I would say, I'm going to have her come, but I want everything to be positive. I know there's got to be some negativity, but you know, she knows what her disability is. She knows what she needs to do, what she needs to do. So can we just talk about how to help her get there? So I think that as IEP team members can think about that. And I know that, you have to talk about the strengths and weaknesses, but it's hard, I think, sometimes for students. And I think too, I think somebody mentioned about, or like David was saying, what I don't want to do. And I love that because a lot of times and we're all advocates on this call, like we pigeonhole these kids. You're in life skills, so you're going to go to this track. You're in autistic support, you're going to this track. Oh, you're in learning support, so maybe you could get a trade. But then there's never mentioned about, students with ID can go to college. There's college programs all across the state. They're wonderful programs. 20 years ago there was nothing, but now, and when you mention that, sometimes I was like, well, how can that happen? It can happen. It can happen. So I just, I've been doing this for a very long time, but it's always, I love coming to trainings because I always can learn, if I've learned something new. And I love that I learned that it's okay for, like David was saying, to say, I don't want to go work in a fast food, because a lot of times, what do people want to do? They want to put kids in restaurants. And that's a pet peeve of mine for many years, that if that's not what they want to do, that's not where they need to go.
Right.
So I really love this presentation. It gave me like I said, I love joining things because if I can learn one thing, and I did. So I thank you, David, for that. And Jennifer, it was a great presentation.
Oh, thank you, Susan. And I believe you put a question in the chat as well that I wanted to make sure we addressed. Unless
I think it was the other Susan.
Another Susan.
Hey, Susan. So the other Susan said, does the school need to know you want to do an SLIEP, or will they accept it at the time of the meeting? Okay, so that's a good question. It is a really good question, especially if you're just getting started with this. I always reached out to the case manager first, if I'm not the case manager for the student, and have a discussion about it. And I always reach out to the family. So I kind of contact the team prior to starting the process. I've never had anybody say to me, no, don't do student-led IEPs. But I guess it could happen, right? But I would probably share just to, again, you're creating an atmosphere of collaboration and teaming. And so we want it to be like that from the beginning. So, I mean, I would probably let them know so it's not a surprise at a meeting. But thank you for asking that question. Anybody else have any questions you wanted to ask? Oh, David, go ahead. Sorry.
I respond to the other comment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I wanted to say that because of my speech impediment, I can be really quiet. It was really intimidating to have a bunch of people over there that I didn't know at the meetings. And people at the school make a lot of assumptions about students or they suggested for me that were way off because they just thought there wasn't much happening in the way. Telling them about my exterior, like curricular activities, I'm really surprised them, and I think it helped open their minds.
I think it absolutely blew their minds. And when you were talking about like the different kinds of coding you were doing and showing us things you created, I mean, I know my mind was definitely blown. So, yes, thank you, David, for sharing that out. I appreciate that. All right. If anybody else has any questions or things they want to share, by all means, keep putting it in chat or unmuting. I am putting into the chat a survey link. This is from my work, so it's just something you can kind of do. It really helps me out. I am required to do it as part of my work, but it's just to kind of talk about this professional development and how it went. So I'd appreciate it if you guys could fill it out. That would be awesome. And then I think maybe Melissa has something that do you want to share as well? Do
Yeah.
you have something to share too, Melissa?
Just in closing, and Jen, I will also share the survey in my follow-up email too. It typically takes me about a week or so to send out the follow-up email just because our recordings are edited and so that they also have closed caption on them. But I will send everything out, the survey, the PowerPoint, with all of the hyperlinks, and then also a recording of the video. I think it's going to be really helpful. I think there were a lot of I had a couple of school districts reach out because they weren't able to attend tonight, but are looking forward to having the recording. So, in closing, I really just wanted to thank everyone for coming and for spending your evening together and hearing all of this information and coming together just as, a community wanting to support and empower students. And Jennifer and David, I really appreciate you being willing to share your time and David, your lived experience on how this has worked for you and how this can work for other students too. Um, I'm hoping this is not the only conversation that we're all going to have about student-led IEPs, but I will also, like I said, I'll email everyone. My contact information will be in that email. So if you think of something in a week or a month or 6 months from now and you're like, I really need to ask Jennifer and David this question, let me know. You can reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you with them or try to help answer any questions you may have. But in closing, I just really wanted to thank everyone. And David, it was absolutely a pleasure. I'm so glad you were here. But thank you all for coming. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. And I will be sending out a follow-up email. And that is all I have for this evening. So thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Melissa, for setting this up.
Yeah, it was lovely. Like I said, I've been super excited about it for 2 months now. So I hope to have you guys back again, almost as a follow-up conversation.
That'd be great.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, everyone, and good evening. Bye, David. Thank you.
Bye, David.